now my pleasure to introduce Mick Chisnall from the ACT government.
Good morning. That's me. Terrible photograph. It looks like I'm sort of looking through a portal on the Titanic. Not terribly flattering. I run the Government Information Office for the ACT government. I'm also a research student at the ANU in online sociology. I'm very, very interested in the way people interact with technology, essentially. Today, what I'd like to say about teleworking in general is that in 10 years' time, or maybe 5 years' time, I'm of the opinion we won't even be talking about it, we'll just be doing it. It will become the de facto arrangement. So what we're talking about today is something that is going to be sort of temporary. So I start from that position. I'm not today talking about the ACT government policy on teleworking, other than to say that two things. Firstly, that our attitude, policy-wise, is that we're very flexible, family flexible basis, which means that if we do have people teleworking, we do make arrangements and we do accommodate. That's not in terribly active engagement, but that consideration of active engagement is coming to the top of the discussion, and I can tell you that at the most senior levels of the public service, at least, there are papers and discussions going on. So what I'm saying today represents possibly the way I believe that we should be thinking about it, the sort of issues that the people thinking about teleworking for the ACT government as an employer will be considering. Because it's interesting, if you're advocating for telework, to look at it from our point of view. And what I'm suggesting is this is a way of potentially getting into it. Okay, so next slide, let's use this. And next slide, let's use this.
I was going to say abracadabra with the way
The dimensions are they're not rocket science. It's a triple bottom line. We've got to think about this from the point of view of a social dimension, an economic dimension, and sustainability dimension. Next slide. Let's talk a little bit about this, about the social aspects of this. Now, the point is that humans are very, very good at collaborating. That's why we have come fairly long way, and some would say negatively, perhaps, in terms of our use of the planet and attitude to the planet. But you can absolutely say that a lot of the things humans have done over the last 100,000 years or so or longer has been because we are very, very good at collaborating. But my point is that our collaboration, and essentially telework, is about collaborating at a distance over technology. It is a subtle business. Now, there's a picture of a door there, an office door. The reason that that's there is because how many of us relate to the politics of office doors if you ever work in an office, where your boss says, if my door is shut, then I want to be left alone. If my door is open, then I have an open door policy. It's a bit more subtle than that. If I walk in and I look inside the door and they're on the telephone, then I might sort of stand back and wait to see if they come off the telephone for a certain period of time. After a while, my tolerance goes and I'll leave and come back again a bit later. So my point being that the process of interruption, the process of communicating is a subtle business. And it's not just a case of making a call so when we morph to a technology-based interaction, we have to be aware of the subtlety of interaction. We have to understand that when people meet and communicate, they're getting so much more information than just the voice. They're picking up the verbal cues, they're picking up the way people stand, what they do with their hands and so on. So when we talk about collaboration virtually, we've got to consider the standard, the level of technology that enables us to pick up on those cues. So, a granular thing that's pixelating every 5 minutes is going to become annoying. It isn't going to give us those cues. On the other hand, do we need to spend $1 million on a high level, telepresence type process every time? No, it has its place. But we do need a place in the middle that gives us enough of that human communication to allow this to happen. Next slide, please. Now,
The location is incredibly important in this whole discussion. It has meaning and it's relevant. It has relevance. Now, workers, managers of a certain age, of my age, I don't include myself in this, by the way, because I've trained myself out of it, have this attitude that I want to see my workers, and I feel very uncomfortable if I can't see people beavering away at the desks in front of me. We often hear that. Now that's a real feeling, and the question is, and often it's illogical, because the chances are that they could be doing anything in those cubicles. The chances of us actually monitoring and knowing what people are doing in a non-invasive way are probably more available using network at a distance than they are sitting in an office. But the psychology of this that we have to address is that feeling of loss of control for a manager. It goes back to the way hierarchical processes work. The other question is this business of who is us and who is them, which is really, really important in telework. That somehow we have a balance of, we are aware of the identity. We're aware of whether this person at the other end is of my group, my social group, or there's someone else. And the way we relate to each other, the way we collaborate, is very dependent on that basic social arrangement. So we've got to be aware of it. I would maintain, I would argue that the failure of many shared services organisations around the country isn't through a lack of technology. It's a lack of that basic usness and themness. And that for this sort of process to work, there's got to be more usness than themness. Now, and we have to consider the way humans create affiliation, the way we create identity, how we decide that these are our people. And a lot of that is about meeting, and it's really a hybrid. I would advocate thinking about, when you're doing telework, having not just at a distance, but understanding why it's important that you meet physically, why it's important you celebrate together physically, and having that balance to really be aware of the identity that you're creating of your group. This is a very subtle business, and places like Yahoo, who in the last month have come out and said, oh, we're not going to allow this anymore. Yahoo, who have all the technology in the world, are saying this. And I suspect the reasons that they're saying this get back to this feeling of control and this feeling of cohesion. We have to consider how to run our business and how to communicate and do it differently, because we can't just plonk the technology in and expect it to work. It just won't happen. Economic, next slide please. Well, the great thing about the NBN, I'm a great believer, is that it does economically have a potential of getting rid of the tyranny of distance in Australia. It enables us to play in a world market. It has tremendous upside in terms of eliminating traffic jams, eliminating 2.5 hour drive to work in Sydney or maybe in Melbourne. We don't have that in Canberra. We have little bits of that in Canberra. We don't have that level of problem. So the point I'm making is that the business case for this is situated. You cannot assume that there's one business case for everywhere. It's actually located. One of the things that I'm very conscious of in Canberra is that we see ourselves as a very low density, spread out city, which creates us all sorts of problems. So we have the idea that we will create a corridor, a fabulous corridor between Gungahl and our CBD. When I first came to Canberra 20-something years ago, we didn't have a CBD. We used to tell people, I used to tell people who were visitors that this was a city without a CBD. What we had was these regional hubs, these regional centres. Okay? So the reality is that we have to put these plans together. We have to consider the densification of Canberra, the creation of a CBD, the creation of a high density corridor, along with the notion that we can allow more and more people to work from home in the suburbs. Okay? I'm not saying that means you don't do it. I'm saying you've got to think about it. That these are issues that a planning organisation should be thinking about. Let's talk very quickly about the internet sales. Now, I'm not an expert in this, but I suspect what's happening in our malls and our shopping centres is really worth watching. Because just as today, there's a news item that said that some guy in Queensland is going to charge people $5 to come and browse in their shop. And I suspect that's got a lot to do with the way we're buying things nowadays, that we go and browse in shops, but we buy on the internet at best price. And more of that's going to happen. So what we're going to end up with are these huge malls, these beautifully air-conditioned, warm, social, full of cafes, the sort of places that people, particularly older people, tend to congregate. They go there. It's a social exercise. It's not just buying things. And I suspect that we should be considering malls as proto-work hubs of the future. You know, the first person who puts in an environment in a mall, it's probably already been done, I'm sure it has, which is a teleworking hub in a mall, so people can go there and get all the benefits of working in the mall, but actually have a hub, and it would make sense economically for the mall owners. Next slide. The other leg of the triple bottom line, sustainability. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems to me that if I take 30% of the staff out of the buildings in CBD, in Civic, and they work from home, that we better have some pretty clever heating systems in terms of, are we still going to heat the offices? Can we switch bits of the heating office off in the office for the people who actually want to be there? And aren't the people at home going to turn on the heating? So potentially, and I'm not saying we've got to think about that. We've got to think about the balances. It's not just all upside. We've got to balance that about the positive transport, less cars on the road, less need for buying more infrastructure to support less cars. So that it's a complex equation. So in summary then, what I'd be saying is that it's a done deal, in my opinion. It's only a matter of time. When you come to look at selling the idea of these projects, look at it from those three perspectives, but most importantly, look at it from the point of view of the location that you're talking about, because they're not going to be the same. And it's the modelling that we need to do to make a decision about telework in an environment, in a located environment, is a fairly complex exercise that needs to be given a whole deal of thought. So thank you very much.
Thank you. If you're like me and you've got about 20 questions you'd like to ask me, the good news is he's not leaving early, and we'll come back to him later and we'll have a bit of a Q&A later on.